All right, we are live.
Yay.
So, Colin, how long have we been working together now? When did we first start?
I thought it was 2018, I
Yeah.
want to say. So that's what, 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think you're about right, 2018. And tell us all again, where were you working when we met?
I was COO for Demonware, the online studio for Activision. So, running the backend infrastructure for games like Call of Duty, uh, at the time Skylanders, and it was pretty awesome. You and I met at a scaling up conference of all places. I think we connected through, the networking app where
Mhm.
it's like, hey, here's some random people who have similar interests. I think I've never connected with anyone else through those things except you, which
Oh
has been
yeah,
awesome.
no, I remember that very clearly because we were working with a different coach at the time, and he was our introduction to scaling up. And we were still coming out of our like nerd shells. Like we have to go to a business conference. All right, fine, we'll go. We'll go once. We'll see how it is. And I remember Jeremy and I were looking at the networking app, and it showed you all the attendees and where they came from. And we're like, oh, look at this guy from Demonware. He might need a pen test.
Did you know of Demonware at the time?
Huh? We yeah no I Jeremy knew of Demonware. I didn't. Jeremy was more into the gaming scene than I was. But we were basically like, oh, cool, this guy actually works in technology because you go to a scaling up conference, it's all different types of people and companies. So we were more excited to have somebody like from a cool tech company that we could go hang out with and potentially meet. But so I reached out through the app, but we didn't end up meeting then. But I guess we stayed in touch.
Yeah, did we not meet at that event? I remember you and I had a call. I actually remember where I was, which is weird. I know exactly what office I had, where the desk orientation was, and probably you and I talked every month maybe for a while there.
Yeah, we picked up a cadence. We didn't talk at the event, but we had some Zoom calls or phone calls after that. And then, do you remember what you shared with me in those early conversations?
Not specifically.
Well, about your career aspirations.
Yeah, I wanted to go out on my own, right? Like
Mhm.
my career, I worked 26 years in tech and video games, EA, Rackspace when I was in Europe, Activision, Demonware. But I've always been more drawn to people and leadership. So I was working on going out on my own as a coach consultant. And I made
But
the
why?
decision.
You're working at Demon where you've got this really, you're a C level at a really cool gaming technology company working for Activision. Like I would imagine there are a lot of people who think like that's my dream job.
100% it wasn't mine. It wasn't mine, right? And I could apply some of those things that I love doing. I love helping people be better leaders. I love people achieve more success. And I just wanted to do it for a broader group of people. I'm also, I think, a generalist. So I'm really interested in different industries. In fact, one of the things I've really enjoyed most in the 4.5 years since I left Demonware was just the amount of learning I've had by being exposed to many different industries. Really floats my boat, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but I made the decision to be really above board with Demonware. Like I told them, I told Activision, look, like this is my long term plan, and uh, and I'm glad I did that because I was being authentic, I was being honest. But you lose some credibility, right? Like when people know you're not in the trenches for the long term with them, it affects you there. So it was never really a problem, but you know, like it was definitely my path to leave there and go out on my own. And 4.5 years later, no regrets, not a shred.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that philosophy. I think it's better to be above board and um, I don't know, to the extent that you can avoid it, like don't give people nasty surprises. Uh, I don't know. It's just the way I try to go about uh, my day to day life and my business life. But then, how did you? I mean, did you want to get into the gaming industry? How did you get to Demonware and Activision? What transpired before that? I know you said Rackspace, and then maybe college was before that. How'd you end up there?
Yeah, here's my career in a nutshell. and it's very unorthodox. I grew up in East Vancouver, single mom, no money, uh, and I was a good student. But in grade 11, I'm 15 years old. I was big into hockey, right? Typical Canadian. And I tore my knee up, tore my ACL, MCL, couldn't play hockey, got depressed, started hanging out with the wrong kids. And I dropped out of high school in grade 11. And my mom worked for a nonprofit organization, and they had government funded programs to help troubled teenagers, battered women, single moms. And my mom said, look, Colin, if you're not going to go back to school, you should come in this troubled teens program. They're going to teach you how to write a resume. They'll teach you some soft skills, and they're going to help you find work placement where you're going to go somewhere and work and get 5 weeks of work experience on your resume. The company's going to get free labor because this government program pays you. So I'm like, okay, great. And I go in this program, and it's not my peer group, Mike. It's like 15-year-old gang members and drug dealers. And I'm like, what have I done? I'm just a depressed kid who can't play hockey. And this was the biggest stroke of luck in my life. I wrote on the application form for that program under hobbies, I wrote video games. This is 1993. And one of the program coordinators said, hey, Colin, I see that you're interested in video games. We had a prior student in this program go do their work experience at EA Sports, Electronic Arts. Would you like to go spend your 5 weeks there? And everyone else in this program is going to like tire shops or record stores to do retail jobs. And I got to go work at EA in 1993 when EA Canada was about 40, 50 people, something like that. And after my 5 weeks, I was supposed to go back and finish high school. And instead I went back to EA. I'm like, why would I go to high school? This is the perfect intersection of the Venn diagram of my interests. Video games, sports, technology. Well, so are you kidding me? Why am I going to go back to grade 11? Yeah. So I stayed at EA for 7 years.
So what were you actually doing in this like 5-week internship?
I was doing QA.
So you're literally playing games and filing bugs.
Yeah. Yeah. Playing games, finding bugs. And, when I went back, I was supposed to go back to high school. I'm like, no way, I'm going back to EA. So I went back to EA right away. And then pretty early, again, this was early 90s, 93, 94. Not many people knew computer hardware at that time, but I had taken apart my mom's computer at home and put it back together, nearly gave her a heart attack. But I taught myself about computers. And so me and a few other people were the few people that had hardware knowledge. So we began this department called the Compatibility Lab, which did all of the hardware testing, managed all the relationships with hardware vendors. So, graphics cards, sound cards, CPUs, and all that. And that was great. I got into a team lead position at 17, just through a battlefield promotion. The two guys that started that department left to other parts of EA. And so myself and another young guy inherited it. And so, yeah, that kind of began a long career in leadership.
That's cool. So that was going to be a question I was saving for later, but at what point in your life, and I guess it was around this time, but maybe you could talk about how it actually transpired. At what point in your life did you realize that leadership was a thing, a concept? Maybe you realize that, oh, I'm in a leadership position now. What is that? How did that transition go down? When did you start to identify as a leader? And what did that mean to you at the time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. I mean, the earliest memories that come to mind for me are, outside of work, it's sports, right? So playing hockey, You've got captains, alternate captains, coaches, like there's leadership. There's so many life lessons you can learn from being on a sports team, young in life. So I'm really grateful for the game of hockey and everything it taught me about teamwork and leadership. I think it started there. I'm the oldest of two brothers, so I don't know if there's any real leadership in there, but when you're an older brother, I think you tend to sort of develop some natural leadership. And then at work, yeah, just being thrust into, you're now responsible for leading this team of 10 people. Like, how do you do that? The skills are different. You can't just be on the tools and do the work. You now have to help other people do that really well. And so, man, I just learned so much, made lots of mistakes early on. And then every successive role I've had, I've just learned more and more about what leadership is.
Yeah. So what was one of those early mistakes that you made in leadership that made you realize, oh, there's actually stuff I need to learn about how to be a better leader? Well, do you remember any of those painful mistakes?
I remember more the more recent painful mistakes, not so much the early ones, but I remember I do a memory comes to mind for me, not about a mistake so much, but I think some of the first leadership training I ever went on was a day of communication skills training that EA put on. And I'd never done anything like that before. And I remember being floored with just how useful it was in terms of leading others, interacting with others. I remember my girlfriend at the time, I went home that night after the training session and I started using some of those communication skills on her in a phone call that night. Things like just listening better. And she was like, "Who are you? Like, this is awesome." So, that wasn't a mistake, but it just really highlighted like you don't really think about the role of communication and how important that is when you're starting out in leadership, but you learn later on like it's an absolutely critical soft skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even just the words you say, but it's your body language, and there's a lot to unpack there. So what was one of the little tidbits or one of the aha moments you took away that you like? Actually, you mentioned listening better.
Yeah.
So uh, go deeper on that. What does that mean? How do you listen better?
Yeah. Well, I talk about this in almost every leadership session I do these days. But I talk about three levels of listening. The first level of listening is you're listening to yourself and you're waiting for your turn to speak. You're filtering everything you hear through your own frame of reference. Oh, Colin used to live in Europe. We were supposed to go to Tuscany, but our flight got canceled and I don't know if we have airline credits. And you're not listening to me anymore. And there's a gravitational pull for us to listen at level one because we're all the heroes in our own story. But it's by far the least effective form of listening. Level two listening is when your full attention is on the person speaking and your full intention is to understand their perspective, even if and especially if it's different than yours. And that requires patience, empathy. It requires emptying your brain. It requires parking your need to be heard first. And then level three listening, you mentioned, it's the nonverbal stuff, right? Eye contact, body language, tone of voice, what's not being said. And most experts think about 90% of all communication is nonverbal.
So how does that intersect with our virtual world today? Like, what have you seen in your coaching practice now? If so much of communication is based on nonverbal things like this and things like Zoom, how much are we actually losing um, by not having face-to-face interaction?
Yeah, I think you just work within the constraints. So there's there's still things available to you virtually. We can see each other's facial expressions, eye contact. You can generally see when someone's not paying attention or not engaged, right? You can see that virtually. You can't on the phone, but even on the phone, you can pick up tone of voice. You can pick up what's not being said. The richest environment obviously is in person, right? Where you can pick up on all kinds of cues, but you just work with what you got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about for yourself, Mike? For listening, has that been a skill that comes naturally or less so? I'm just always curious about this because maybe it was that early EA communication skills training that I applied to my girlfriend and got instant good feedback.
Yeah, and
But
then
like it
20
feels
years
natural
later,
for me, but I think it's not for a lot of people.
right? And then 20 years later, you're delivering your Communicate Like a Pro course, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
thought that, I mean, that's pretty interesting to me that that's one of your earliest kind of aha moment memories, and that's such a big part of how you're helping leaders and executives today. For me, I think there are two moments I go back to. One, I was already running my own company, um, but I hadn't really thought of leadership development or leadership as a set of skills and capabilities that I could develop. But I remember I was actually at home on a Saturday and the TV in the kitchen was just playing in the background. And it was college basketball. And they were talking about one of the team captains on this college basketball team and how great he was, how great a leader he was. I think he didn't go to a military academy, but he was in ROTC and he was like, great athlete, great person, great leader. And then they pulled him up for an interview, and I guess they were asking him about his leadership experience. And I'm sure he said a lot, but the thing I remember most is he talked about learning how to have a command presence.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, in that moment, hearing command presence, it struck me like, oh, command presence, that kind of makes sense. You have a presence, that you exude to others that makes them want to listen and follow, and you are the leader. And I think what happened to me in that moment, I realized like, oh, leadership is more than just a term or a buzzword or, a word. It's an actual capability and a set of capabilities that you can learn and develop. So that kind of planted the seed for me. Another moment, we hired this other executive coach. He was our first stab at an executive coach. And one of the things he did was he wanted to talk to some of my friends and acquaintances to interview them about me. And one piece of feedback from another buddy was Mike really needs to work on his empathy. And I got that feedback and I was like, well, I need to Google the definition of that word. I didn't even know what the word empathy really meant. I think I thought I knew, but I was like, what does it actually mean? And I had to Google it. So those were like two pivotal moments where I was like, okay, I have a lot of work to do. How do I, get better as a leader? And I started reading books and ultimately found better executive coaches. I shouldn't say better, but we've had three. You were the most recent for myself and my partners. But what I learned was that executive coaches can reach diminishing returns, right?
Yeah,
Like
100%.
you work with someone, they get you to a new level, and then it's time to move on. You spread your wings and fly until you run into more hurdles, and then you find a new coach who can help get you to the next level, or maybe even go back. So we started working with coaches, and ultimately we found extreme ownership, which I think from an engineer's perspective, like extreme ownership, Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL ethos for leadership from Jocko.
So good.
It's so simple and logical that I think it's perfect for engineers. I don't know. What do you think? You went to the extreme ownership conferences with me and read the books. It seemed to grab a hold of you as well.
It totally did. And something, there's a phrase you said or one of your partners one day that stuck with me all these years later, which is Jocko is our spirit animal. And, and he's just such a good representation of, like you said, simple leadership practices. And look, I didn't, even though I'm a high school dropout, I did an MBA later on in life. And I've read leadership books through a firehouse for decades. And nothing grabbed me the way extreme ownership did in terms of its simplicity. The format of the book is excellent, where it's a story about a leadership principle in combat, the description of it, and then application in business and life. It's just simple. It's well written. And I recommend that book all the time for people. Sometimes people are off put by the kind of macho military nature of it. But it's just so good. And the events are incredible. I think I went to two of them, one with you, one without you guys. And, doing a personal training at 4:45 a.m. with the guys was something pretty memorable too.
Yeah, the whole experience is really fun and enjoyable. Not a dull moment at one of the extreme ownership conferences. What do they call them? They call them the muster.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I've been to three. And I guess one thing I would say to people who are maybe on the fence about going to one of the extreme ownership, the echelon front musters, they do change the content. I haven't been to one in a couple of years. I think I'm going to find the next one that I'm able to go to and maybe get a group of people, group of clients to go to it. But the content does evolve. So it's definitely worth going to them again. I would say on a regular cadence, but
Yeah, there's something about being connected because there's a community feel to that,
yeah.
right? And it even goes to the 4:45 a.m. wake up club, which I did for a while when I was going to musters.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really kept up with that habit since, but I did feel a sense of community there, which was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And yeah, just community is super powerful. Like ever since I left corporate life and went out on my own, I'm fortunate that I found solopreneur consulting communities that have been extraordinarily helpful. But
Mm-hmm.
even just informally with a lot of people that are exploring that, it's just, there's so much value in getting out of your own head and just having other people help you think through stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are you doing today? You left Demonware. What are you doing?
Yeah, I help leaders grow and I help entrepreneurs grow their businesses. And the main ways I do that, I do one-on-one coaching. I run leadership training sessions through like an annual leadership academy, and I chair 2 CEO peer groups. So again, going back to community, it's like a mastermind, right? You have up to 14 CEOs of different industries in this group. I chair it, and we meet for a full day every 2 months. We do a retreat once a year. We're going to Phoenix tomorrow. And, in these sessions, the CEOs are able to share their views on the economy. They share an update. What's up, what's down, business, family, personal. And and they bring, thank you, the new Mac. It just crashed my video too there. Hang on.
Yeah, you froze.
Uh, and and then they bring a topic they want to get shared experience from the group. So they may say, look, has anyone been there, done that with acquiring a company or selling your company, or you need to fire someone and it's tough. And then instead of a bunch of advice monsters saying, here's what I think you should do, you get people who say, hey, I've been there, done that. Here's what happened. And, you make a commitment at the end of that session and there's follow up the next session. So you got some external accountability. So that's a really great thing. I was a member of one of those for 5 years before I started chairing them, but just a phenomenal learning experience.
That's awesome. So it's a combination of uh, helping people one on one to level up, but also creating that community um, and that group environment for people to network and help one another out. But also, I think in those group environments, like realizing that, oh, I'm not special. The problems I have, like other people have, they're solvable. We can get through them. We can get better. I think there's a, a sense of like comfort in finding that out and realizing that, you know, hey, it's not all on you. The world is a lot bigger than just you. And, you can get through this with the help of others and also help others along their journey as well, which I've found feel really rewarding for me personally.
When you help someone else, you get a sense
Yeah.
of fulfillment out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me more.
I think we might have to save that for another podcast, Colin.
Sure.
We're coming up on time, and I also hear my children running up the stairs. They're going to start breaking down my door pretty soon.
We're going to have some impromptu podcast guests.
Yeah, we are. So where can people find you, Colin?
ColinCox.com, LinkedIn, Colin Cox. That's where.
Okay. No Instagram yet.
I have an Instagram account. I'm not active on it. I have Twitter. I'm not active on it.
I think we got to get you on Instagram. That's like I don't know. That's my passion project right now. Figuring out how to grow on Instagram.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm game. I mean, I do post regularly on LinkedIn. I try to put stuff of value out there. And it's probably pretty easy to just spit the same stuff to Instagram to some degree. I don't know. You can tell me about that.
Yep. Again, we'll keep working on that. All right. Thank you, Colin. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing everything. Really cool story from high school dropout to gaming industry executive to now executive coach, helping other CEOs level themselves up. Really awesome. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mike. Take care, mate.
Take care.